London as a city is notorious for its cigarette consumption. All over the media and mainstream movies, all of the British characters are usually smoking a cigarette, whether it's inside, outside, in the car, on a bench, you get the gist. To learn how to roll a cigarette from a local is a rite of passage also. There's a sense of romanticism around all that smoking encompasses. Although smoking of any kind has its own health concerns, it also produces CO2 out into the atmosphere and sometimes can release aerosols which have great effect on cloud formation and solar reflectivity. Specific factors we will be looking into are the carbon footprint of the production of a singular cigarette, the carbon footprint of individual output into the atmosphere from smoking a cigarette, the ebb and flows of cigarette production based on the economy and legal factors over time, the estimated trajectory of cigarette production and its influence on climate change, and the impact of cigarette waste on climate change.
Every time a cigarette burns, it releases carbon dioxide, CO2, into the atmosphere. Research indicates that a single cigarette produces, on average, about 14 grams of CO2. While that may seem small, in a city where millions of cigarettes are smoked daily, the cumulative emissions become substantial. Consider the scale. London is estimated to have around 2 to 3 million regular smokers. Multiplying the average CO2 emission per cigarette by the number of cigarettes consumed each day leads to a significant contribution to the city's overall carbon footprint. These emissions, combined with other sources of urban pollution, play a measurable role in local climate change. In addition to the direct emissions from smoking, the industrial production of cigarettes contributes notably to greenhouse gas emissions. Cigarette manufacturing involves energy-intensive processes from tobacco cultivation and curing to the operation of factories and distribution networks. For instance, studies have shown that the entire supply chain, from growing tobacco to packaging and transporting the finished product, can add several additional grams of CO2 equivalent per cigarette. When scaled up to the millions of units, the industrial production of cigarettes accounts for a significant share of emissions. Beyond CO2, cigarette combustion releases aerosols, tiny particles that influence cloud formation and solar reflectivity. These aerosols may alter regional climate dynamics by affecting the way sunlight is absorbed or reflected by the atmosphere. Historically, cigarette consumption in London has seen notable changes. With public health initiatives, stricter smoking regulations, and evolving social attitudes, the number of cigarettes consumed per person has generally declined in recent decades. Despite this downward trend, the legacy of decades of high consumption continues to affect urban air quality and local climate patterns. Historical data reveals that during periods of high smoking prevalence, the cumulative CO2 emissions from tobacco consumptions were markedly higher, contributing further to the overall greenhouse gas emissions profile of the city. Local climate change is driven by multiple factors. Although cigarette-related emissions represent only a portion of total urban emissions, they are an important piece of the larger puzzle. In London, where emissions from transportation, industry, and domestic energy use are also significant, the contribution from both individual smoking habits and industrial cigarette production underscores the complexity of urban greenhouse gas inventories. The combined effect of an individual tobacco consumption and industrial production in London adds a measurable amount of CO2 and other greenhouse gases to the atmosphere. By estimating the rough carbon footprint, taking into account both the direct emissions from cigarette combustion and the indirect emissions from production processes, we gain insight into how even everyday products contribute to the broader environmental challenges. Understanding these statistics emphasizes the importance of comprehensive strategies to reduce emissions from all sources, whether through public policy, technological innovation, or changes in consumer behavior. Every reduction in greenhouse gas emissions can contribute to a more sustainable urban future. Thank you.